The Hero's Journey, a Mindful Accord podcast, with your host, Rich Decker.
Hello, and thank you for taking some of your valuable time to listen to the show. If you enjoy this show and have been inspired by this episode or another episode, I would encourage you to join our Patreon page. For those who are unfamiliar with Patreon, it's a platform that allows artists and content creators to build relationships with their audience, while at the same time earning enough money to keep providing the content. When you join our community, you will gain access to exclusive content such as live guest Q&As, behind the scenes, and other exclusive offers. And you can join for as little as $1 per month. There's a link in the show notes that'll take you directly to our page. My guest for this episode is Rael Riddick. Rael is a psychic medium and intuitive guide. Rael and I have known each other for over 30 years, but only recently reconnected through unusual circumstances and synchronicities that we talk about in the interview. It's something I don't quite understand and may never completely realize why. Rael comes from a famous military family, and her father was a founding member of the Flight for Life program. She was at one time a highly paid CFO for a large corporation. Although her special abilities have been with her from the time she was a small child, she only shared it with a few for fear that people would think she was crazy. So she led the typical American life until her son passed away unexpectedly. After his passing, she decided to pursue her life's purpose by using her unique abilities to help others. She does this through her company, Soul to Soul Intuitive, by giving in-person and distant readings. This is the hero's journey of Rael Riddick. Enjoy. Well, thank you, Rael. Thank you for joining us today on the Hero's Journey, a Mindful Accord podcast. I'll start at the beginning of your journey. Now, we have a bit of a history together. We grew up in the same area of the world, and we went to junior high and high school together. Could you tell us about your childhood, and what's your perspective on growing up in a small town like we did? And what's something that your parents passed along to you that you still carry with you today?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation to join you this morning. Yeah, we do have a history. We grew up in a small town. I was actually raised in the military and did not settle into the town until junior high. So a lot of my earlier childhood was spent living all over the world. So most of which was outside of the United States. So that in and of itself provided quite the education. However, landing in the small town that we did is both a good and a bad thing. It's good because it's a small town and you have that close-knit support, if you will. It's almost like a really close-knit family. But on the bad side of that, everybody knows everybody and everybody knows your business, and they're going to make assumptions based on the rumor mill rather than fact. And so that could be quite troublesome. So it felt like being in a small town, we had a lot more cliques than you would normally have in a larger town or a larger high school. Does that make sense?
Sure. I could see that. That's interesting. I was just talking with someone who is in, he's 15 now. And I asked him about cliques, and he wasn't sure what I was talking about. What did you take from growing up where we did? What do you carry with you today? I feel very fortunate, honestly, that we grew up where we did, because, we had so much as kids in our school and everythit.
I think what I took from it is because of the way we were all together, it was a small class. These are friendships that we carried forward that someone coming from a larger class may not carry with them. They tend to carry the college relationships, whereas our high school friends were paramount in our learning and in our experiences. And so those are friendships that we have carried forward.
Yes, that's true. So what do you still carry with you today that you took from that time, whether it was your military background or something your parents instilled with you? What's like a core foundational thing that you still carry with you today?
My core foundation is I am no better or any worse than anyone else. The thing to understand in my situation, although for a majority of my life, I did live with my parents, my grandparents actually had a much more positive influence on me than my parents did. And my grandparents helped raise me. And one of the lessons that they let me know is everyone has a story. You need to respect their story and respect that you are no better or worse than anyone else. So it's that old adage where you need to treat the janitor with the same respect that you would treat the CEO. When I was in corporate America, I had a very important job. I had a lot of responsibility, but I was no better than the production worker that was on the manufacturing line. I made a lot more money than they did. I had a lot more responsibility than they did, but I wasn't any more important because without them, I wouldn't have the job that I had. And so everybody plays a part and everybody is equally as important for different reasons.
Well, I think that's a healthy attitude. So you had a lot of turmoil in your home. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did. I mean, I was raised in a very affluent family and I was afforded a lot of luxuries. We were a very wealthy family. I wanted for nothing. I was afforded a lot of privilege. I also recognized that that was the hard work of my family. That was something that was provided to me, not by me. And that if I wanted those same luxuries going forward as I became an adult, that it was something that I had to work for. But we all have secrets behind closed doors. What people see on the outside is not necessarily what's going on the inside. So although I had all of these luxuries and I had all of these gifts, if you will, I also had a very violent alcoholic father. And I had a mother who suffered from severe depression her entire life, as well as eating disorders. So it was very dysfunctional at the same time.
How have you dealt with that now? How did you put that to rest as far as those issues? And what's your relationship now with your parents if they're still among us?
Well, both of my parents have since passed. My mom passed away 15 years ago. My father passed away August of 2017. I'm very fortunate because, number one, when you deal with something like that, it's not easy to come to grips with. And everybody is going to come to terms with a situation like that or an education like that much differently. So I had a mentor ask me one time, who was your best teacher and who was your worst teacher? Well, those were my parents. The worst teacher in the respect that they really had no business raising a child. They weren't ready to raise a child. They had their own stuff that they had to deal with. And they passed or attempted to pass a lot of that stuff on me. But they were my best teacher because they showed me what I didn't want in life and what I didn't want to do or become. And so that's why they were my best teacher. What I had to learn as I became older was not to own their burdens. And that's a programmed response that I think we all run the risk of doing, is owning somebody else's burdens. It wasn't my fault that my dad drank. It wasn't my fault that my mother was depressed. But as children, you own it. If I was a better daughter, if I had better grades, if I, came home early and not late, if I did chores faster, you come up with all of these reasons. But at the end of the day, you can't own somebody else's burdens. And once I let that go and realized that They were theirs to own. They were theirs to learn from, and that they were on their own journey. Their journey is not my journey. And once I respected that, it made things a lot easier. And I was gifted with the ability to leave nothing unsaid with either one of my parents. As an only child, I didn't have anybody else to lean on. And I was able to hold each of their hands when they each took their last breath. And that is something that I think is a gift, because not everyone is afforded that. And so it allowed them to pass in peace, and it allowed me to find peace in something that was very difficult growing up, but be able to move forward with pride. Does that make sense?
Sure. I think that's something that many of us don't have that opportunity to do, to resolve these issues that we carry with us from our childhood. And I look back with my parents, and you get to the point, I think, as an adult where you have to just say, they did the best they could with what they had. Anything that I'm still carrying with me today, that's my issue. That's not my parents' issue. That's not anyone else's issue. That's my issue. Well, let's go back to when you were we were growing up in this area. What did you envision for your life, or what did you want to be when you were growing up?
My lifelong goal was to actually be a flight nurse. So I loved medicine and I loved helping people. I knew that helping people was my passion and was my purpose in some way, shape, or form. My father was one of the founding pilots of Flight for Life. And so I was constantly surrounded by it, and I liked action. The faster things were, the more urgent things were that just really got your blood racing, the more I liked it. And it was a challenge. And that's what I wanted to do, was be a flight nurse. So I'm a long way from being a flight nurse, though, I'll tell you that.
Right. So Flight for Life, your father was involved in the foundation of that?
Yes. Yes, he was.
How did that come about?
Because my dad was a helicopter pilot. He used to fly Hueys in Vietnam, and he ended up becoming a world-renowned helicopter pilot, actually. So when we came back from overseas in the mid-'70s, late 70s, they were bringing Flight for Life to St. Anthony's Hospital in Denver. And my dad became one of the pilots. And back in the day, one of the prerequisites was you had to have flown in Vietnam, because they were the only one with the skill set. Obviously, today they can't do that, and things have changed dramatically. But my dad and the entire crew are the ones that basically set the rules, because when they did it, there were no rules.
Why was it a prerequisite that they flew in Vietnam?
Because of the difficulties in where they may have to get in or out of when they're trying to rescue someone or save a life. So you needed to know how to fly at altitude. You needed to know how to, my dad would go into an accident scene and fly underneath the power poles, underneath the power lines. You needed to know how to get up and out of there fast. You needed to know how to get into tight situations. You needed to know how to land on a single lane road without hitting a tree with your rotor blade. Huey pilots from Vietnam used to know how to do that, because they had to do it in Vietnam to save everyone's life.
So did your father ever resolve his demons and with the drinking or anything like that? Or did he?
No, actually, drinking is what killed him. Drinking is what killed him. No, he never resolved the issues. He did acknowledge them, which for me is huge. He acknowledged them, and he acknowledged where they came from and why he chose to do it, and acknowledged that he was doing something by choice. Although I saw him infrequently the last 5 years of his life, we did see each other on occasion, and he agreed not to drink when he was around me, which I appreciated, because he was acknowledging that I didn't want to be around it. And that was huge. It suddenly wasn't everybody else's fault. He took accountability for it. He still chose to do it, but he took accountability for it, and that's huge.
Why do you think your father drank? What were his demons?
Oh, he had a lot of demons, and I found out long after he had passed that my dad started drinking when he was young. He was young. He was like junior high when my dad started drinking. By the time my dad was in high school, he was already an alcoholic. But what I found out was, so was his father, so was his grandfather. So he grew up with, or he became what he grew up with and what he knew. So out of 5 children in my dad's family, there were only 2 that didn't drink alcohol. 3 of them were alcoholics.
Now, did you experience any problems with alcohol or addiction at all for yourself?
No, I didn't. But, they say you either grow up to be one or marry one. And I did the latter. Learned my lesson with that one and ended it pretty quickly. I do to this day, though, find it very difficult to be around anybody that's intoxicated. It makes me very uneasy.
Well, it's been my experience for myself that any more than a couple of drinks usually does not bring out the best in anyone, regardless of who they are, from my experience.
No, I'm agreeing with you 100%. That doesn't end well usually.
So how was your mother? What was her relationship? Was she the enabler, or did she have her own issues with addictions?
No, my mom wasn't the enabler, but she was the fighter. My memories with my parents, I mean, to be very, very frank, there was one night that I heard my parents fighting and I went into the room and my father was in the process of choking my mother and telling her it was time for her to die. And I had to go get the neighbors. And this was an everyday occurrence. It literally, I mean, if my dad was not home on time, my mother knew that he'd be drunk. And a lot of times she would just put me in the car and we'd go to a hotel. And I remember driving around for hours because she was afraid he was following us. And we had to make sure that he wasn't following us. She would fight back, but she would fight back by getting violent back with him, because he was very violent with her and she would fight back. It's that fight or flight. So my mother, as a result, fought depression her whole life and an eating disorder. Now they divorced when I was 15, but by then the damage is done. I mean, I was a sophomore in high school by the time my parents divorced.
Did you ever ask your mom why it took her so long to leave that situation, or why she stayed in that kind of chaos?
I did, actually, because I used to beg her. I remember being 6 years old and begging her to please leave him. And when I finally asked her, why did you stay so long? She said, because you needed a father. And if I hadn't had you, I wouldn't have had to deal with it. Oh, okay. Thank you. What do you say to that?
So she didn't accept her part in that scenario.
No, she never did. She blamed me.
Interesting.
Nope. She blamed me. So it was a lot to deal with. It was, see, like I said, you and I knew each other in school, but boy, we sure as hell didn't talk about this stuff in the hallways at our lockers, did we?
No, not at all.
There was a lot of stuff going on.
Sure. And again, growing up in a small town, it's idealistic ideas and, the big city or whatever, that those issues usually, or at least you think they don't matter, but it's all just a microcosm of the larger picture, I guess. So you had
well, they do. And
no, please.
Well, what I was going to say was you do, but remember, a lot of people focus on image. They worry too much about what other people are going to think. That was my mother's biggest fear, is that I was going to go tell somebody.
So,
and then it would make her look bad.
So that was more important than what was actually going on in the household?
Oh yeah. It was all image. It was what everybody else thought and what we looked like. And, you know, she would remind me that we came from a very affluent family where stuff like this didn't happen. And you don't want to muddy the family name.
Well, that's interesting. I guess we all are concerned about the outside appearances in some way, but that seems strange that you would suffer through all that pain just for an image.
Well, I think my mother was raised with image too, because my family is a very famous military family. There is an image to uphold, and you don't want to make the officer look bad because his family can't be well behaved. And that's how my mother was raised.
Where did the famous part of it come from? Can you elaborate on that? My
great grandfather was the first 2, 3, 4, and 5-star admiral in the Coast Guard, and was one of the first Joint Chiefs of Staff and served under 3 presidents. My grandfather was in the Air Force as a fighter pilot and holds the record today for flying the most types of aircraft of any person. And do you know who Chuck Yeager is?
Yes.
Broke the speed of sound. That's my mother's godfather.
Oh, I see.
So those are the circles that we went around. We have a mountain named after us, a street named after us. If you go to the Coast Guard Academy, the library is known as Weishi Hall, which is our family name. And you walk in the door and there's a huge mural of my great grandfather that says "Our Father" above it. And so it was, and of course, all of the admiral's sons reached the same high level status within the military that he did. So
now, was the addiction or the alcohol a problem for them as well?
No, the addiction was not on my mother's side of the family. The addiction was strictly on my father's side of the family. You know, at least I wasn't dealing with it from both sides. But that was why, you know, my grandparents were such a huge influence on me, because my parents were dealing with so many issues. I didn't find out until after my mother died that my grandparents raised me for the first 5 years of my life. I had no idea.
Strictly or just mostly?
Well, that it's funny that you say that. I would have said strictly up until a year ago, but I found out from my dad's side of the family that my grandparents had me 6 months of the year, and my dad's sister had me 6 months of the year, and they had split custody for the first 5 years of my life. And it wasn't until a year and a half ago that my cousin came to me and said, "Well, you and I were supposed to be raised as sisters." I had no idea. And everybody said, "Well, we thought you knew." I said, "No, my parents never told me." And I found out that my aunt was filing for custody to adopt me. And my parents found out about it, went to my grandparents' house and kidnapped me in the middle of the night. Quite a revelation when you're 49.
Sure.
Like, wow.
This was all because of the problems in the household. Is this why this all came about?
Yep. Yep. It all came about because everybody had demons, and as a child, I was the collateral damage. And I think to some degree, every child is collateral damage at some point in their life.
Well, I think if you look at like like a job description of a parent, probably most of us are unqualified. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's how I kind of see it. But
oh no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Your children, especially your first child, teaches you how to be a parent, or you hope that they do. I should say they don't always, but you hope that they do.
And learn. My background's I had a degree in psychology, and I recall that those first 6 years of our life are just critical, and those imprints that we have, if we don't deal with them eventually, if we don't take the hero's journey, I guess you could say, that we're going to live that for the rest of our lives in many ways.
We are. And I do believe that you have the choice of either being a victim all your life or allowing it to teach you what not to do and move forward successfully. You will never find me on Dr. Phil's couch. I will never be a victim. But that's my choice. I've chosen to look at it that way.
Is that something recent, or did you feel victimized when you were younger?
No, I felt very victimized when I was younger. Actually, this was something that I have had to come to terms with actually since my mother passed. And it's been over the last 15 years that I've been learning, right up until, like I said, a year ago, because I'm still learning more. I mean, it's kind of funny because everybody in my family gives me all this information and they see that I'm shocked, and I keep saying, I had no idea. And they keep replying, well, we thought you knew. Well, I don't know why anybody would think I knew, because my parents, I guess everybody thinks, should have told me. But I was having a conversation with my uncle, actually, when my grandmother passed away back in 2012. It was kind of funny. And mind you, in 2012, I still didn't have all the facts, but he didn't know that. And we were having a conversation, and I was just kind of telling him how I lead my life and what I think and kind of where I'm coming from. And he said, wow, I know your story. And he said, you should be way more messed up than you are. Thanks.
Now, growing up with all this, you had a special ability.
I did. I didn't tell anybody about it, but yeah, I did.
When did you first begin to recognize it?
Oh, I recognized it as a child. I recognized it as a young child, actually. And I remember conversations when I was 3 and 4, but I was convinced that it was my imagination. Everybody was told that I have a very vivid imagination and don't pay attention to her.
Who were these conversations with?
Usually ghosts, putting it in layman's terms, because I've always had the ability to talk to people who have crossed over. And I would talk to my guides. I had spirit guides that protected me. And to me, they were real. How
did that affect you as far as, do you think that was a way to buffer what you were dealing with as a child, those abilities, or?
Well, from my perspective, it protected me and it helped buffer. They always found a way to keep me, for lack of a better term, mentally safe and keep me grounded. I was always in a position that I was never in harm's way, physically. So as an example, if my dad was getting violent with my mom, I would just happen to be at a friend's house and come home, and that's what would stop it. Or there would be enough energy in my mother to tell me to go get the neighbor, and I would make it to the door before my dad. And I recognize now that those were my guides. I knew it then, but I wasn't allowed to talk about it. I was asked to suppress it. I was told I had a vivid imagination, and it created a lot of anxiety. I was anxiety ridden for the first 40 years of my life, 45 years.
Now, did you have any type of religious upbringing? Was there any type of religion involved?
I did, actually. Until my parents got divorced, I was raised Lutheran, Missouri Synod, which they call Catholic Light. And I was confirmed, and I went to church, and I taught Sunday school, and I relied on the church. It was a safe place for me. And it was the only place that I felt like I really belong.
Did you have any conversations with people from the church about what was going on with you and your abilities?
I did one time. I had an experience that I could not explain without going into detail because it probably wouldn't make sense, but it happened on a road out where we grew up, and I was by myself, and I saw something that I could not explain, and there was absolutely no logical explanation for it. And so I went to my pastor, and he recommended me to a psychiatrist because he felt that there was something else going on. And what had happened was I thought I saw an angel. I really thought, and now that I've been able to look back on it, I know that that's what happened, but he made me believe I had to question myself. So you go to the pastor of the church, you let him know that you saw an angel and you wanted to share the information. And he basically told me I was crazy. There is no such thing that is ever going to show themselves to you because you're not worthy. And he thought that I might need to be evaluated for schizophrenia.
Did that happen? Did you go see somebody or no?
No, because I knew what I saw and I knew what I felt.
What did you see?
So I'm driving down the road and a car passed me. And for some reason, it just caught my attention. And I drove several miles down the road, and it's a 2-lane road in the middle of nowhere. And there was only one way to get to where I was going if you're not going to 4x it on back roads, which I did not do. And they were not in a vehicle to do so. I got a few more miles down the road and the exact same car passed me again with the same 2 people in it. But yet they had never pulled off the road. It was only a few miles apart. There was no other way that they could have passed me twice in such a short period of time. When they passed me the second time, they both looked at me. It's hard to explain, but they both looked at me. They were familiar, but I didn't know them. And the feeling that I got was unlike anything I'd ever felt in my life. It was an unmistakable warmth and security and safety. I recognized the feeling. They went around me. I looked up and I'm on a straightaway. The car was gone. The car was gone. There was nobody there. I was the only one on the road.
So what do you think that was?
Those were my angels, just letting me know that they were with me. And immediately, well, I shouldn't say immediately, within 5 days of that encounter, we had run into some family issues. My grandfather got very, very, very ill, and my grandfather was my hero. So I think it was a precursor letting me know that I'm protected and they're with me and everything is going to be okay. So it was a very, very stressful time in my life back then.
Now, how would you convince someone that hasn't ever had those kind of experiences? Or what would you say to them if they're skeptical about that and saying, well, it's just all in your imagination?
Well, I don't believe that I have to convince anybody, quite honestly, because my reality is just that. It's my belief system. And I don't ask you to believe the way that I believe, but I do ask you to respect it. And I will give you that same respect. So perception is reality. And I know what has happened to me and I know my reality. So it's not for me to convince you of my reality, nor is it for you to convince me of your reality. I guess what I'm trying to say is I try to be very, very mindful of boundaries and respect that your boundaries are your boundaries. Who am I to tell you that you're wrong?
So you survived your childhood, become an adult, and you're working. What were you doing? You mentioned you were in corporate America at one time. What were you doing?
I was in finance. I was a chief financial officer for a company in Denver. I played the corporate role. I traveled the world. I sat at boardrooms and conference tables and wore the suits and dealt with the anxiety. And I did the typical 9 to 5, although I didn't work 9 to 5, but it was more like 14 to 16 hours a day. But, you do the job that is the expectation. You live a normal life. So, we had the 2 children, we had the 2 dogs, we had the production home, the nice little Leave It to Beaver home. And I went to I went to work and we took the family vacations and I dealt with my anxiety on the side. Again, it's one of those things you don't talk about.
How was your ability playing a role at that point? What was going on then?
That's what was driving my anxiety, actually, because I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't talk about it. I suppressed it. So if I acknowledged anything or felt energies, I would suppress it because there was no room for it. And I didn't know how anybody else would feel about it. Now, the odd thing is when my mother passed, I had, my mentor, who is a psychic medium, I used to see her regularly because I wasn't going to not acknowledge my belief. I wasn't going to deny my belief system. Had to find the right avenue that I could talk about it and be accepted. Not worry about people thinking I was crazy.
You mentioned crazy. Did you ever think you were crazy? Did it ever cross your mind?
Oh, yeah. I've had several instances where I literally thought I had lost my mind. I was crazy and just didn't understand why me. Because instances like that seem real. When you're not sure what's going on, and remember, I had suppressed it since I was a child. You've got the human programming of don't tell anybody. You've got a vivid imagination. It's really not real. And then you've got what your mind is telling you and what your eyes are telling you and what you hear, and it's real. And you're getting what you think are validations to prove to you it's real. And it's an argument that you go through. So yeah, I thought I was losing my mind.
But while you're living that life, it's kind of in the background, or is it a part of your daily life at that point?
Well, honestly, it had become part of my daily life. I didn't realize it at the time, but it had become a part of my daily life because I was wound so tight. Because I wasn't acknowledging the energy that was communicating with me. I was suppressing it, and it's a buildup of energy. And so what happens is my anxiety goes through the roof. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't relaxing. I'd had people tell me I didn't have an off button. I worried about everything. The stress and the anxiety were literally almost unbearable at times. I was sleep deprived. I got angry quickly. I would get the shakes. I felt like I was running a marathon and I was standing still.
Well, when was the breaking point for you with that?
The true breaking point was February. Honestly, it was February 2016. And I remember it. I had been seeing my mentor for a very long time, probably 13 years. And she kept telling me about this mentor program. And she would give me my intuitive reading, which is a reading where you talk to guides and just help somebody when they feel like they're at a crossroads in their life. And she would do a medium reading for me, which is where you connect with those who have crossed over. And she would let me talk to my mom and talk to my grandparents. But then she'd always bring up this mentoring program. And I thought, as an intuitive guide and as a medium, you're great. But now I kind of felt like she was just trying to get money out of me, quite honestly. I really, because it was like, why are you asking me about this? I said, yeah. Okay. Whatever. And she said, no. I can help you get in touch with your psychic abilities and with your psychic side. And I kept hearing my childhood programming. You don't have the same skill they do. You'll never be able to do what they do. You just have a really vivid imagination. So, in my mind, it was always everybody else. Everybody else could do it. I couldn't do it. And so I kind of thought she was nuts. And then December 2015, my son passed away. And one of the first people I went to go see is my mentor. And I knew that my son had psychic abilities. And I mentioned it to her because I used to watch him. I could see it. And I told her about it. And I said, well, I know that Eric had psychic abilities. And she said, I've been talking to you about this for 15 years. Where do you think he got it from? And it just knocked me back in my chair. And I said, so I'm not crazy. And she said, you never were. But your abilities frighten others. So she taught me that people who try to convince you that you're wrong for a belief system or something that you do that they don't understand, it's because they're afraid of it. And people fear what they don't understand.
Your son's passing was the catalyst for a great amount of change. Can you elaborate on what happened to your son?
Eric was 27 when he passed. He will be 31 this year. At the end of the day, it was an aneurysm that took his life. He was suffering from really, really, really severe headaches due to the aneurysm, but we didn't know that it was an aneurysm. We just thought it was migraines or something like that. And he was attempting to get rid of a headache, and he made himself pass out, and he never woke up. So it was deemed an accidental suicide. And the aneurysm was discovered at the autopsy. My husband and I found him. And I will remember that moment when I walked in that apartment door for the rest of my life. Because from that moment on, I was a changed person.
How so?
Wow. Because loss is hard in any way, shape, or form. Okay. No matter what you're losing, when you lose something, the word lose comes with a negative connotation. And so loss is hard. And I never try to diminish anybody else's loss, a loss of a mother, a loss of a grandparent, a loss of a good friend. They can all be devastating. However, the loss of a child is a loss that is a physical pain because it's a part of who you are. There really aren't adequate words to explain what it is to lose a child. And it goes against the natural order. We're not here to bury our children. We're supposed to go first. That's the natural order of things. I knew from that moment that I would never be the same person that I was before. I didn't know how. It was something that I knew.
But that your son passing is what made you choose the path you're on now. Is that correct?
It did, because I realized, number one, that time is precious. From the time my son passed, everything kind of lined up in a very linear fashion. Shortly after my son passed, my company offered me early retirement. I started mentoring with my guide, and I released or gave permission to myself to honor my psychic abilities. And from that moment on, everything I ever dreamed of for my life began to come into place. It allowed me to clear out the clutter, if you will. My circle got very, very small. I suddenly didn't have a whole lot of acquaintances in my life. I had a select group of true friends. Things are not important. And I found my voice. I stopped worrying what everybody thought. I stopped worrying about how to soften the blow whenever you had to tell somebody that you disagreed with them. It changed the way I looked at life. But I knew from the moment he passed, there were three things that got me through. And I remember saying this the night he died. We were very, very blessed to have him for 27 years, because not every parent is given that gift or afforded that. And I recognized very early on that I'm not the only mother to have lost a child. Mothers lose their children every single day, which told me I'm not alone, which says I have support. I have somebody else to help me through this. There are people who have done this before me that have the strength to help me move forward. And there will be people that come after me that I will have the ability to help. And so by acknowledging that granted, I was in a club I didn't want to be a part of, and you're a lifetime member right off the bat. It let me know that I wasn't alone and that I had the support that I needed from people who truly understood.
Oftentimes when a child dies, regardless of the age, I guess many times marriages dissolve. How were you able to sustain your marriage through that difficult time? And did you feel responsible in any way for what happened?
Oddly enough, and I say oddly enough because everybody warned us, okay, there's all these steps, there's all these levels of grieving, and you're going to go through this and you're going to go through that. Well, that's them, and I appreciate the advice and the help. I never felt angry. To this day, 3 years and 1 month in, I am not angry. I have said from the day he died, I will gladly bear his pain if it means he no longer has to. And that is my honor as his mother. But the first thing that my husband and I did was we allowed each other to grieve in our own way. There was zero expectation in how he should grieve and how I should grieve. And I respected his way of grieving, and he respected mine. And when I was falling apart, he found the strength to stay strong and hold me up. And I hope that I've done a good job in doing the same thing for him. But we removed all expectation, and we respected each other's right and room to grieve in the way that worked best for us. So in the end, we ended up becoming really, really good friends. We were already good friends, but that bond strengthened.
from your perspective, you've been married a while now, yes?
Yeah, it'll be 25 years this July.
Well, that is an accomplishment, considering that most over 60% of the marriages dissolve. Or do you attribute the strength of your marriage to communication or just being friends? Or both?
It's both, because I'll be honest, it hasn't been easy. It has not been easy. When my husband and I met, Eric, just a backstory, Eric is actually the product, if you will, of my first marriage. And that didn't last long. We separated when Eric was an infant, and I did the single mom thing for 5 years. So it was a second marriage for me. It was a first for him. He married into an already pre-made family. And within a year, he adopted my son, making him our son. And then together we had a daughter. So all of these elements that you would think factor into a risky relationship, we went ahead and threw all those in the mix. You know, if you're going to do it right. We had to learn to communicate. We had to have open and honest communication. And it took us many, many years to get to that point. But there also had to be a friendship and a level of respect. I don't have to like what my husband does or a decision that he makes. But if I respect my husband, I feel it's my responsibility to respect his decision. But we have an openness that allows us to share our concerns without judgment, without criticism, because I respect the journey he's on and he respects the journey I'm on. You know, my mentor always said, not my contract, not my journey. So I'm of the belief system that our soul has a contract in this lifetime. And we know what we hope to get accomplished and hope to learn in this human form until we pass. Because I do believe in reincarnation and we continue to live multiple lives. I'm not on his journey. I'm part of his journey, but this is his journey. It's his contract with his soul. I can enhance it or I can try and impede it. I would rather enhance it.
So when Eric passed away, you got the early retirement?
I did.
And then what did you decide to do from there?
Well, all of our, we had best laid plans, right? We were living in Colorado. We were raising alpacas. We were traveling the country showing livestock. Our daughter was in college. I had the good corporate job. Our son passed away. Our daughter moved to Oklahoma with her boyfriend, and we didn't have any family left. And you look at one another and you answer that question, wouldn't it be great if? And so once my company offered me, because, as long as you've got a steady paycheck, you've got something binding you. You've got something tying you, because it's fearful to step away from that. That's a security blanket. And I did not have the strength to step away from that. So my guides helped me along and said, well, you need to. And so they offered me early retirement. I jumped on it like a fat kid on a cupcake and said, yes, please. And we sold everything we own in Colorado. And 6 months ago, we landed in the Virgin Islands. I'm tired of the cold. I don't like the snow. And I wanted to live near the ocean. And in the course of all of this, with the help of my mentor and my guides, I started Soul to Soul Intuitive, and I teach others how to get in touch with their psychic abilities and realize that they're not crazy. I give medium and intuitive readings, helping others gain guidance in their life through talking to their guides, helping them through crossroads, but also realizing that your loved ones are never far away. They're still part of your life. John Lennon said, you don't live and then die. You just move from one car to the other. So, our lives are energy, and that energy has to pass somewhere. So, what I like people to understand is there is life after death. And I mean that in two ways. I lost my son's physical presence, but there is still life for me to live. So there is life after death. But then when it's my turn to cross that plane, I know that there will be another life for me after this physical presence.
So do you think that we all possess the ability to be in touch with that other world, I guess you call it, and why do you think that some have it more than others?
Oh, I think everybody has the ability, but it's like a muscle. You have to work it. So it's whether or not you're open to it. And if you're not open to it, then you're going to miss the signs that your guides are giving you. It doesn't mean you don't have guides. It doesn't mean that they're not around you. It means that you have chosen not to lend it any credibility. And that's okay. They don't need credit. So I think anybody can strengthen those abilities.
How do you teach someone to trust that? Or do you?
Well, you give them examples and help them to experience validations. And then it's up to them whether or not they want to acknowledge them as a validation. As an example, if I were to give you a reading and I let you know that your guides are showing you 4s falling on numerology, or let's say your guides are showing you a blue feather. You walk down the street and out of nowhere, a blue feather's in the sidewalk that catches your attention. That's up to you whether or not you want to acknowledge that as validation that your guides are saying, hi, we're here. We got your back. You always have a choice. Can you learn it? Of course you can. Do you want to learn it? That's for you to decide. Sometimes learning it is not in your path. That's not your journey this go around.
Now, with your soul to soul intuitive,
Mm-hmm.
who comes to you? How do you find your clients, or who's seeking you, and who are you seeking?
First of all, word of mouth is usually how clients come to me. You help one, they tell a friend who tells a friend who tells a friend, and so on and so forth. The type of people that come to me are people who, number one, have suffered a significant loss in their life and they don't know how to deal with the grief. It can be very, very overwhelming, whether it's a parent, a child, although I've had a lot of parents who have lost children cross my path since Eric has passed. Loss is significant if it was a significant relationship in your life. It's not for me to say my loss is any greater than yours because mine was a child and yours was a parent. But when you need that validation, especially people who didn't get the closure when their loved one died, they need that closure. And it's very healing for them when there's validation given without mistake that that person is still with them and still part of their life. It's encouraging, and there's a strength to it that helps you understand that, again, you can have life after death. On the intuitive side, I get a lot of clients who are just at a crossroads, who know in their gut, because you follow your gut instinct and your gut says, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And they need help figuring out what is it I'm supposed to be doing. They just feel lost. Sometimes they tend to look at it as a crystal ball. And I will tell you, I'm not a crystal ball. There's certain information that I cannot tap into. And there's certain information that I request not to tap into. So I say an affirmation every morning. Do not show me death. Do not show me anything negative, which I cannot prevent. Only bring me messages of healing, love, and light. So the message must serve a greater good. So you get a lot of people who want the lotto numbers. Am I going to have cancer in my life? Am I going to die in a horrible accident? I don't know. I don't want to know. And I can't tell you. Now, if you're going to make a move and you want to know if you're on the right track, we can see what your guides say. What I typically tell people, no matter what kind of reading you're having, is you may not get the reading or the messages that you expect, but you will always get the message that you need.
So from your perspective now, what is this life? What is all this about?
Learning our lessons. My husband quotes one specific quote from Nelson Mandela that is just very poignant to me. And he said, I never win or lose. I only win or learn. And I'm here to learn. And I'm here to learn as much as I can. I'm here to help as many people as I can when it is asked of me. And it's reasonable, let's put it that way. Within the purview of my abilities and what I'm here to do. So I think we're all here on our own journey, and we're learning before we go on to the next stage. And hopefully we learn our lesson so that we can move on to the next lesson. It's like graduation.
What's the next stage, and to what purpose? Or is there a purpose? Is it just, this is what it is and there's no purpose? This is what you do.
No, I think that that's all a matter of opinion. I think, your purpose is separate from mine, and the way you interpret your purpose is going to be separate from mine. What is my soul's journey? I'm a healer. I'm here to help others learn and grow and understand that from my perspective, there is always going to be something to be thankful for. So the people that need that lesson or that need a reminder of that will be brought into my path. That's why a lot of healers are brought together. Because you work together, you pass that message on, and it's all working at a much higher vibration to bring about a positive change. Life doesn't have to be difficult unless we make it difficult. We all have a story. We can all make it difficult. You can wake up in the morning and stub your toe on the bed and make it difficult. Or you can use that and say, well, crap, the bed doesn't look good there, and every time I walk by it, I hurt myself. So you rearrange the room. Sometimes our lives are like that room, and we need a little bit of rearranging. It's trusting the process, honoring your truth, speaking your truth, and using it for a greater good.
Do you think that this life, because I'm curious, I've read the books. I can't remember the gentleman's name. It's a well-known book talking about soul groups, and that is this life like a boot camp of some kind or something? Or what is this? What is this world from your perspective?
Well, I don't think it's a boot camp. I think it's a class. I look at it like school. So you go from kindergarten to 12th grade, and every year, if you do the required work and you get good grades, you graduate to the next level. That's what, in my mind, putting it simply, That's how I view reincarnation. Every single lifetime, you've graduated onto the next level. And every single lifetime, hopefully, you're learning more, you're doing more to give back, and you're operating at a much higher frequency. Your vibrations are higher, and it's positive vibration. See, I'm of the belief system that if you haven't learned your lesson, so everybody says, as an example, what about evil spirits? Okay. I don't believe in evil spirits. I believe that there are energies that function at a much lower vibration, which makes them appear angry. But I don't believe in evil spirits. Those that operate and function on a higher vibration are usually more positive. So if you live a good life and you work hard, you're generous with your time, or, you just try to follow the golden rule. You pay all your bills on time. You love your spouse, you love your kids, and you live that Leave It to Beaver life. Even though someone might not say, wow, you were extra special in this way or that way, you're still operating at a much higher vibration. You don't have to find the cure to cancer to operate at a higher vibration. Does that make sense?
Sure. Well, let me play the skeptic again.
Okay.
Prove what you said to me is the way it is. How do you prove it?
How do I prove which? The abilities or reincarnation?
Reincarnation. Because I my background in the last few years has been heavily influenced by Buddhism, and that's a part of Buddhism, the reincarnation thing. But I'm still very skeptical of that. I'm just like, well, how do you know? I mean, how do you know? Prove it.
Two things came to my mind when you said that. Number one, it's not for me to convince you. It's for you to learn on your own, going through the journey. If I give you all the answers and you know where you're going to end up, then you prepare differently for the lesson. And you prepare differently for the journey. So you may not learn what you should be learning if somebody gave you all the answers. Is there a way to prove it? I believe there is. There's a book out there by Dr. Brian Weiss called Many Lives, Many Masters, one of the best books I've ever written. There's a lot of psychiatrists out there that do past life regressions, that you can go into a hypnotic state and they will regress you back to previous lifetimes, of which the details that they can get from that session can be proven through historical records. If you want undeniable proof that there is reincarnation, I would always recommend somebody get a past life regression and back into the facts that way. But my question for you is, would you still find an argument to disagree with it?
Well, I guess it's something that's come with age. Is just I'm skeptical of most things. So it's not that I'm not saying it's not true. I'm skeptical of everything, really. Quite honestly, I've become a skeptic of life and everything else.
And that's not a bad place to be. But from my perspective, that comes from a level of security and fear.
Being skeptical?
It's a way to protect yourself, to question. Being skeptical, it's a way to protect yourself, but it's also a way to learn, because skeptics ask questions. And how do you learn? You learn by asking questions. And then you can come to your own conclusion. You don't have to believe the way everybody else believes. It's okay to believe what you want to believe. I believe that the human race has "yeah, but" in their conversation way too much. Why are we programmed to argue? Well, we argue because we feel like we're in a competition and we have to make everybody believe the way we believe. Well, why does everybody have to believe the way we believe? So it doesn't make you wrong. It doesn't make me right. And as long as we respect that, then you have a foundation. See, then you have a starting point, because I'm not trying to convince you that I'm right and you're not trying to convince me that you're right. Because in some way, when you're busy arguing, now, first of all, I do believe that everybody listens to respond. They don't listen to learn, they listen to respond. So they're really not hearing what you're saying. But this way, you respect each other's opinion and hopefully learn something from it. And if you're not busy arguing, which takes a lot of energy, by the way, why would you try to convince somebody that they're wrong to prove yourself right if you truly believe in it? My truth is my truth. I'm not here to convince you. It's my truth.
Sure. Well, I want to touch on this. So could you tell the listeners about how you and I reconnected after all these years and kind of the unusual circumstances around that?
Well, yeah, I can actually. And definitely that is a perfect example of messages from beyond, if you will. So you and I went to school together. We've known each other a long time, but we just recently got reconnected, as you had mentioned. And I listen to your podcasts all the time. Well, I like the messages that you have, and I like what you're doing and what it all stands for. And it speaks to me. And so I learn a lot. I think I had put a comment out on Facebook to one of your podcasts. And I don't even remember when I did it. It was several weeks ago. On December 28th, and I'm looking at my phone as I'm telling you this. On December 28th at 5:31 p.m., you sent me a message and you said, "Hi, Rael, thank you for all the support. Would you consider being on the podcast and telling your journey?" I do not have, before you sent that, I did not have any other reminder that you and I had spoken since we graduated high school. However, attached to that message was a message between you and I dated November 20th, 2009, where you came across and said, "I met your son at Applebee's." You were in our hometown, and my son was in there seeing a friend of his who worked there, and apparently the two of you had met. And for some reason, you and I connected briefly through Facebook in 2009 to let me know that you had met my son. Now, the oddity of all of this is all of this came to light, like I said, on December 28th, which was the 3-year mark of my son's death. And you sent me that message almost to the minute that I found him the day he died.
Which is blowing my mind right now. I got to be honest with you. I don't understand it at all. It's all a mystery.
I'll tell you what, I deal with spirit all of the time, and it took my breath away. It seriously took my breath away. And I interpret that as a message from my son, letting me know that he is still with me and he sees what I'm doing. He believes in what I'm doing and he supports me. He was always next to my husband. My son was always my biggest cheerleader. He was my best friend. And I spoke to him every day. We were a very, very close-knit family. And I spoke to Eric every single day. And that was his way of saying, hi, Mom. I'm going to bring you an opportunity and know that I am with you. I am supporting you. And you got this.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. That's a cool story. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. It's all a mystery to me.
But it's really cool, huh?
It is. It is cool. It's part of the journey, I guess. But perhaps it will be revealed at another time. I have no idea. I'm still grappling with that.
Well, and the funny thing is, when you and I talked about it, you said you didn't remember meeting him.
I don't. I have no recollection of it.
It was 10 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, there's nothing. I don't remember it at all, which is it's even stranger for me. I mean, there's no recollection. Maybe if I went under hypnosis or something, I could bring it back. But
you're not remembering that time in your life for a reason, and that's okay. We were given this reminder as a brief reminder for a future connection. That's what this was about. And this was an additional message from my son, giving me encouragement and confidence to move forward. And I'll take whatever message I can get.
So how does someone find out more about you, or if they're interested in what you can do, how would they get a hold of you, or how do they find you?
I do have a Facebook page. It's Soul to Soul. It's SOUL, the number 2, SOUL, intuitive. And then I also have a website, which is soultosoulintuitive.com. So again, it's SOUL, the number 2, SOUL, intuitive.com. And they can reach me through my website. All of my rates are on my website. I do live in the Virgin Islands, but I can do Facebook, or I can do phone readings very easily. I do not have to be in front of you because I'm connecting to energy. I'm not connecting to you. And I can also travel if I need to. So I'm going to Palm Springs in March. So if anybody's in California, I'll be in Palm Springs in March. So.
Well, that's a good time to be in Palm Springs. March is a nice time, and that time of year. Well, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for supporting the show and sharing your story. I'm still kind of tripped out about the whole thing, if I'm being completely honest with you. I don't understand it, but I guess I guess so.
That, you know what? That's good, because what that means is it's challenging you. And anything that challenges you can help you grow and can help you learn.
Right. I guess the most amount of growth, it comes from the things we don't understand and the challenging times. If everything was easy, you don't grow, right?
That's correct. That's correct. So I again want to thank you for the opportunity, and I've enjoyed the conversation. I think it's something that you and I could probably talk about at great length, and I would welcome the opportunity to, discuss it even further, because like I said, I learn a lot from the work that you're doing and the podcast that you put out. And I just really, really appreciate the opportunity to be included.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you again for listening. And please leave any comments or suggestions. We're always looking for ways to improve our show and make it the best show it can possibly be. Visit mindfulaccord.com, where you can find additional episodes and you can follow our blog. We give some helpful information on mindfulness, meditation, and just ways to manage our everyday stressful lives. And most importantly, if you know of a friend or a family member that would benefit from this story, please share it with them. Until next time, I'm Rich Decker.